Morning.
Good morning, Valerie. You look very sharp today.
Oh, good. I hope it works through to the mental aspect as well as.
Yes, certainly there is. How has Easter been? Not too much cholesterol?
No, not yet. No, I'm quite disciplined, except when I have people here. So it's easier when I'm on my own too. So once I open boxes of chocolate, then I'll eat them. But you know, if they're not open, I can be quite good. So I sort of lurch around a bit.
Well, you shouldn't let them go to waste. On the other hand,
no, I won't let them go to waste.
I think I almost entirely forgot to eat chocolate for Easter.
Well, it depends on local traditions, but Italian traditions.
No, it's sort of usually in the past we've had Easter eggs and and hiding small Easter eggs in the garden for children to find and things like that. But
we did that. The family came.
Above some say 25 or 30, that usually stops looking for Easter eggs in the garden.
Well, even the 15-year-old is quite keen on searching for Easter eggs in the garden. So he hasn't grown out of it yet, not if there's chocolate at the end of it.
Hello, Ben. You have also survived Easter?
Did, yes.
Yes.
Yep, good to see you all. It's a fairly boring weekend, really didn't do very much at all. But relaxing all the same.
Well, we've all had to relax, I guess. There's still more or less lockdown going on, right?
Yeah.
You haven't even opened the pubs yet. I've seen that Johnson wants to go to a pub as soon as possible, but that's still in the future or something. Is there a program for opening up in Britain? A day? When is that day?
Oh, they're various sort of changes in small steps. I mean, in Scotland we have different dates from England, but I think it's similar that there are certain dates on which certain businesses can open or you can do certain things.
Yeah, I think 26th is the next milestone in Scotland.
Yeah, I think that's a sort of travel relaxation.
Yeah.
Okay, until then we'll have to sit at home and write papers then.
Yep, I guess so.
Ciao, Glenn.
Hi, how's everyone?
Fine, thank you. Your pen, or to be exact nowadays, your keyboard is all used up. You have written a lot, although it was weekend.
Yeah, I think I'm about a week behind schedule at least, but
Well, apart from that estimate, how is the whole volume going? Is it progressing? I saw some emails about the estimation chapter that is progressing. But is everything going according to plan? This is more a question to the coordinators of the volume.
Depends what you mean by plan.
It's doing all right.
Yes.
I think we haven't lost any yet. So I think it is more or less going to plan. I mean, inevitably it's slower than everybody would like, but I think we anticipated it would be slower. So you know, I think it's all right. So Lisa's has gone in, which is so she got the biggest Easter egg for
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, if you look, there's now an IDP folder called submitted.
Oh,
In which
Dennis is really a bit ahead of himself because there's only one thing in it.
Well, I thought it started. It's setting a challenge for the other challenge papers, isn't it?
Aspirational.
Yeah, but several of the others are on the point of going to Hans, so they're reasonably complete.
But submitted means that they have gone to Hans for the first reading, or really submitted with peer
nope.
review?
Submitted to Epidemics.
The journal.
Okay, to the journal officially. So in theory,
Okay.
Okay, we seem to have stabilized up on the number 6.
yeah. Francesca says she'd join us at 10:30 if we're still going. So I guess the main issue is that I did a bit of rearranging because we had some discussions about what the different sections are. So I sort of, as I said in my email, I kind of went for, well, I've kind of gone for sort of between host, within host, and then sort of pathogen perspective as the kind of 3 first sections, because I couldn't really come up with that seemed like an obvious way of dividing things. And then I also I moved the contact tracing from the second section where it was to be part of this section 6.4, which is, I think it kind of fits, but I'd be interested to see whether other people feel that's sensible. But it's, somehow contact tracing is about collecting data. So I mean, it's a slightly directed form of data collection, but I think it kind of fits. And then the last 2 sections, I don't think need much work, but I haven't quite gone through them. And I noted that some of the stuff that we included from expert elicitation was retained in chapter 7. So I might need to edit some of that out or just refer across to the estimation paper.
Yes, the only question about contact tracing is, as you say, if it's data gathering thing or an intervention?
Yeah, I mean, so section 6.4 is about pandemic preparedness, including data collection. So I kind of feel it you know, it could fit there.
Because I guess it's also mentioned in the 6.1.2 or not at all, that contact tracing
Not really, actually.
Yes, in fact, I noticed I started reading through the thing, although I'm slow at reading, so I haven't gone very far. There's a sentence saying that NPIs, the non-pharmaceutical interventions, they want to reduce transmission via social distancing measures, lockdowns, and use of face masks. But I guess that, well, I don't know. For instance, contact tracing is another one of the, well, maybe you don't see it as an intervention against the spread. Usually it, however, leads to isolation of found people, etc.
Yeah, it's true.
And
the problem is that I think
in the list of NPIs, maybe one should have the word also isolation of infected or suspected infected individuals, because that's a typical intervention in a way compared to normal life. That you tell somebody to stay at home instead of going out. Hey, Peter.
Hey, sorry, I'm late.
No. I mean, hi, Peter. How's it going?
Oh, it's well here.
Peter has his spring hairdo now. It's time to.
Yeah,
very nice.
It's more that we tried, or my wife tried to do it, and then we had to do damage control by going even shorter.
Ah, okay. It looks nice.
Yeah, yes. One of the reasons that I didn't put, I didn't include contact tracing under interventions and contact processes, which I kind of agree it does fit, but there was a discussion last time or the time before that it needed to go after the discussion about within host dynamics.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, maybe all that's maybe one way of handling that would just be to sort of do some forward referencing and sort of mention contact tracing is going to be discussed later.
I suppose there's a sort of a distinction in some ways between a measure which, you know, is a lockdown, so it's an isolation that applies to everyone or some group, and you know, the sort of quarantining with after contact tracing, which is sort of an individual measure.
Yeah.
You know, so maybe, but maybe in 6.1, I haven't looked. If Jumpy says there's a list, maybe one could adapt that slightly to sort of mention other measures of quarantine.
Yes, the list could be longer, and then some forward referencing that. In particular, contact tracing will be treated further down or something.
Yeah.
I mean, so this section's already a little bit compromised in the sense that it's not just about, it doesn't only mention interventions, it also mentions, you know, exogenous factors might affect contact, you know, like some kind of other shock might affect contact. So it's already not pure in that sense. So by which I mean, you know, maybe it's okay to be a bit incomplete here. Yeah, so in general, I don't know what the best option is, because obviously I literally just sent this to you like 40 minutes ago, so no one's had a chance to read it, obviously. I kind of felt I should send something, but I mean, basically, I think my plan is to continue this revision until the end of the day, and then just send around the version so that people can actually read it at their leisure. Maybe we can meet to discuss it next week if that seems like an okay timescale for people. And that would give people a week to, more or less a week to, you know, read through it and yeah, spot some of these inconsistencies perhaps.
Yes, because if one goes to the first page, which is the kind of table of contents, just the titles, that now looks rather well, I would say. So introduction, then between hosts, the contact processes, within hosts, but it's essentially about macroscopic within host things. There's infectivity profiles and stuff like that. And then more detail, a pathogen perspective. And then there's this 6.4, which is kind of using, well, it's about intervention. Well, it's so in data collection. So, okay, so it should be, according to the subtitles, it should be focused on data collection, or what data do the models need, or something like that, or how data feeds into models. Okay, and then modeling for real-time decision support, and then policy. So what in general, in some sense, I guess I miss among the main titles is something devoted to modeling interventions, because that's been very central in this COVID business. I mean, or at least coming up with ideas for interventions and guessing how they would work. So I guess it merits a more central place. I mean, modeling interventions, or
couldn't 6.5 be called modeling interventions?
It doesn't really cover any of that. I mean, it's kind of more about problems to do with, you know, it's quite philosophical in nature in a way. 6.5, it's more about the problems of responding in real time, and you know, problems of using noisy and sort of biased data and so on.
Yeah, so that's the,
it's kind of more of the practical aspect of things, I guess.
So that's the sort of theoretical aspect of so the
yes, the theoretical aspect of doing things.
I mean, we did originally have a section on interventions, but then it kind of got dispersed amongst other places. So it's kind of, you know, it kind of comes up when we talk about vaccination. Obviously, it kind of comes up when we talk about contact tracing. It comes up in section 6.1 as well, in terms of
yes, there is a subtitle, interventions and contact processes.
Yeah. So I think as long as the bit at the end of the introduction sort of pointing to the rest of the paper explains where interventions are dealt with, perhaps that's okay. But
well, I guess that's a kind of main feeling, is that we all apparently need to read this paper first.
Yeah.
And then maybe because it's true. It's more a question, I guess, of moving around things now, seeing if things are in the proper place and if they are repeated. But I don't think so. You have kind of eliminated most repetitions, right?
I think so, yeah. There's a few places where things are mentioned, but in a very short form because they've been discussed elsewhere. So I've tried to eliminate most of that.
Then are you happy to do sort of rewriting to make sure things make sense, or do you want to delegate? I'm just asked because I mean I was reading through our Lisa and my policy section 6.6 and found a couple of sentences that didn't seem to be grammatical or coherent.
Yeah, so I haven't actually gone. I've got to the end of 6.5 and I haven't done 6.6.
Oh well, I'll wait and see what you do to that. But I mean, just flag up there were a couple that. Also, I noticed on the references that 32 is the same as 10, and there are probably other identities of this case.
Yeah, no, I need to
I mean, as an author of it, it's a very important paper, so I'd like it to be twice in the references. It wouldn't really be standard practice. Perhaps just putting it in bold would do as well.
Yeah, no, I've got. Yeah, I've just been going through, so I've got 2 lists of references which need to be.
Yeah, so when you mesh them together, you should spot that.
Yeah.
Are there areas of interventions? I mean, is it something we ought to be looking for as we read to make sure that all the things we want to say about interventions are covered somewhere?
Yeah.
I mean, there is the other paper, of course, specifically on interventions, but I do feel that since this is the modelling paper, you know, we ought to have to make sure that we have got all the areas in that we feel are important.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one reason. Yeah, I think it'd be great if in general, when people are going through it, there's things that they feel are missing that why haven't we spoken about this? I mean, one big one I think is indirect transmission, which I at least mentioned now and said that we're not going to really focus on, but that might be something we come back to in the discussion a little bit, because obviously the next pandemic may be something completely different. You know, it might be more environmentally transmitted.
Yeah.
Pathogen.
Well,
I don't think that necessarily obviates everything that we've got here. It's just, change the perspective somewhat.
Well, I don't know about Britain, but in Italy, it's compulsory for all open shops to offer hygienizing liquid at the entrance of the shop. And in most places, they advise you, please hygienize your hands before entering or whatever. So apparently indirect transmission is in the foreground of people's minds.
Yeah, exactly. But I don't think we really talk about it much in this paper.
Well, they now seem to be saying that the possibility of picking up things from surfaces and is much less than they originally thought. So. And we're all quarantining our post and our shopping unnecessarily and all that sort of thing. So.
Well, I've never quarantined my post. But
a lot of people have.
Yeah, no. I'm thinking that actually, it's an amazing contrast actually that in terms of understanding the disease that the genome was sequenced in a week before most of the world got worried about the pandemic, and it's taken over a year to get to strong statements like that surfaces are unimportant in transmission. It's been so much longer sort of time span to understand what features of transmission are important or not. I mean, I think it's probably not a question for modeling, but it does seem an important question for future pandemics. I mean, perhaps it's just that the kind of experiments that would actually allow you to really tell which modes of transmission worked, sort of seen as unethical.
Hi, Francesca.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, there were some experiments quite early on, weren't there, with, I think, ferrets or something, and also looking at how long the COVID lasted on different surfaces. I seem to remember one of the sort of talks in the INI session was about that.
Yeah, no, I can remember actually that there's sort of colourful videos of where they did experiments of putting powder on people's hands or something, and then after they'd all been in a cafeteria for 20 minutes, just seeing how widely this had spread, but which was obviously sort of assuming that surfaces were important pretty much, and then saying how would surfaces work, but the actual our surfaces actually causing significant numbers of infections was, there can't have been very good data on, because I think if there had been good data, we'd have stopped worrying about surfaces so much a long time ago. So
yeah, I mean, I guess the problem is with all these kind of things that, including direct transmission experiments as well, is that what you get in an experimental setting is radically different, in fact, to what happens in reality as well, which makes it difficult.
No, I think it's just a rather good example of a scientific challenge for future pandemics, in contrast to the genome sequencing one that are, not within our scope of our volume, because they're not really related to modelling at all. But
well, perhaps that something on that could be fitted into the pathogen perspective. Would that make sense? Because that section's a bit short at the moment, and so it does focus very much on the sort of phylogenetic type of aspects. So
yeah, I think it could be worth mentioning that just to start modelling, you need an understanding of the disease, and whereas the genome sequencing, insofar as that's helpful and relevant, was got off to an absolutely flying start in terms of actually understanding which kinds of contacts are effective, and which is obviously going to influence how you go about modelling. Can be a much more difficult thing to establish.
Yeah.
But also all the stuff about the transmission by air, singing in closed rooms or whatever, is a form of indirect transmission in many ways, because most of our contact models are about person-to-person contacts. And also the data that we have, I mean, type polymod was about did you stand close to a certain person, not were you in a room with many people or something like that. So effectively, even all this air business is quite separated from our contact process modeling. It goes into new trends like super spreading events and things like that, but it's not very present in the typical models we use yet. Also because we don't know the exact size or importance of it. I mean, certain rooms seem to be dangerous, other rooms don't, and etc. So it will be difficult to kind of collect data on how often you visit a dangerous place for collective transmission, because you have to define what these places are first.
But
yeah, it all depends on the ventilation. So
yes, various circumstances, ventilation, what's in the room, how long you stay, how apparently many factors. I mean, the physicists have all the details about aerodynamics.
Yeah, I mean, there is quite a lot. There's a group in Leeds that are doing quite a lot of modelling on. Kath Noakes, he does a lot of modelling on these kind of aerosol transport and all this kind of thing.
We had several talks on that back.
Yes,
right.
Nearly a year ago, I think. Yeah, but I mean, I think in terms of basic modelling, though, even if I walk into a room and someone was in there half an hour ago, and as a result, there's virus in the air, and I get it. You could think of that as being a transmission by whoever it was who emitted the virus into the room, and even if actually there were 2 or 3 infected people who did that, don't think it's going to make much difference to sort of modelling. So you could think of me as being one of their contacts, and if
we did. So I had a PhD student who was looking at environmental transmission models and sort of asking the question when the direct transmission models provided a good enough approximation to an environmental transmission model, and it turns out that for quite a wide range of sort of persistence of the pathogen in the environment, the direct transmission models, when you fit them to the data, it's very hard to actually distinguish.
Yeah, that's my intuition. I was sort of trying to hint at there, going, but so yeah.
Which I guess is why everyone
you could say the same as surfaces, really, couldn't you? I mean, because that's indirect transmission. I mean, you contaminate a surface as opposed to contaminating a bit of atmosphere.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So it's logically similar, really.
Yeah, I would agree.
No, the problem with indirect transmission is that you could always say that there is one person responsible for the contamination that then infected others, and so attributed to his R0 or RT or whatever. But the problem of additivity is at least theoretically interesting. If 3 infected people touch the table, will that give a 3 times as big an effect as if one person touched the table? Because that's what we do with the person-to-person contact. If I contact 3 people, then I have 3 times the effect of contacting one person. But if 3 people touch the table and then other people go there, I don't know if it can be added in the same way. You have some kind of sub-additive process, at least for theoretical-minded people.
I know that it was almost 2 weeks ago. It was quite in the Dutch news that journalists going to churches which decided to open again. Mm-hmm. And being there with those big microphones, asking people questions, why are they going and don't they think they are putting people at risk this way? I was really thinking if I were there, I would start asking those journalists whether they studied the risk of transmission through microphone and how much that would contribute and whether they are cleaning it every time and so on.
And everyone, if people are wanting to see what the interventions paper is doing, Miriam has updated the draft, but I think, Valerie, hope you may correct me if I'm wrong here, that the current version, it's a bit misleading if you look at the date of the file, because I think the up-to-date thing is the Google Docs, which is dated February, but is in a process of continuous updating. Is that right?
Well, I think it's a Word document.
If you look at the chapter CH04 Dropbox.
Yeah, but there's nothing in there about the Google Doc, is there?
There's a thing. Well, there's a chapter. I think that's a Google Docs. The chapter there's one that's called Chapter 4 Challenges for Modeling. Mind you, actually there.
There's one updated on the 19th of March.
Yeah, but you see, I think the 26th February one is the long-term link to. It comes up on my contents thing as a different sort of like a little globe sort of symbol rather than a W for Word.
Yeah.
And if I click on that, it seems to take me to a Google Docs, and I don't know how to tell when a Google Docs was last updated. Does it? Can you see?
Yeah.
That?
Well, yes, I can if I look in the browser. So, hang on.
Last update 2 weeks ago.
Well, yeah, I mean, Miriam was editing it online, sorry, offline. I mean, she took it offline to edit, so it wasn't changing in the Google Doc.
Well, I thought she said she.
But in that email she sent this morning,
there's a Word document attached, which seems very up to date with line numbers and full references.
Yeah.
But that doesn't seem to be in the Dropbox at the moment.
Attached where?
So Miriam sent an email this morning to those involved in the,
right, okay, fair enough.
The paper. So if you're not contributing to that one, you probably won't receive it. But I think she said in the email she was going to upload it to Dropbox, or it already was.
Yes,
yes, I mean, it says, I mean, the one that she's attached is a Word document with a date of 8th of April, so yesterday, but she said she's still working on it. I would like to continue working in the Word file now, so I'm not quite sure whether she means now before this afternoon or but that version could presumably be put into the doc.
What I'm going to do, Valerie, what I'm doing as we speak is I'm going to save that as a PDF and put as a PDF into the Dropbox, so it's obviously something frozen in time.
Okay.
I'll do that in the next 60 seconds or so if you just leave it to me.
Okay, that's a good idea.
Because I don't want to cut across whatever Miriam does, and I don't think that will.
Right.
Okay, Dennis is putting Miriam's intervention stuff.
Yeah, so that's now there's a PDF. I hope Miriam won't mind. I think everything else except for the Google Docs there could be archived, couldn't it?
Well, maybe you should leave that for this afternoon. And
yes, I mean, I think I'll ask that to Miriam, because otherwise it's a bit confusing. That's the whole point of having an archive, really, is for people not to feel baffled as which draft is relevant and so on. But anyway, there's that PDF of what Miriam sent this morning, so that's pretty up to date, though maybe redundant by this afternoon, in which case I'll try and make sure there's a new version of it there. Hi, Lorenzo.
Hello.
Lorenzo.
Hello.
Are you alive?
Hi, Lorenzo.
Hey, apologies, I arrived late.
So yeah, Francesca and Lorenzo, I guess the big change from the point of view of the contact tracing is that I've put it in this section 6.4 because we were discussing this before you arrived, but basically I think we had the discussion that it should come after the within host modeling, and I was kind of struggling to sort of see quite where to fit it in, but somehow it seems to fit in to this section 6.4, which is about well, it was originally about how to use models to direct the collection of data, and I somehow think that contact tracing sort of fits that, but obviously it's an intervention as well. So we've just been having a bit of a debate as to whether that's a sensible place to put it or not. So I'd be interested to see when you read through whether you think it fits there or whether it seems a bit odd.
Yeah, apologies, I haven't managed to read anything.
Yeah, well, I literally sent this about 40 minutes ago, so.
Yeah, but
I don't expect
it wouldn't have been any different if you had done it with plenty of advance.
Yeah, fair. I know the feeling. Yeah, so actually, the plan is at the moment for me to just finish going through this and then send around a final, not a final version, but a full revised draft later today, and then give people a week, the next week, to just read it if you have time, and take a bit more time just to go through it and see what you think.
Yeah. Okay.
If that's all right.
Next week I should have a bit more time, but certainly, I'm sure Francesca can help with that. But I should be able to go through it.
Yeah. Thanks.
No, thank you to you.
So then we were just having a discussion that we probably should include something on environmental transmission. So I'll try and add something on that. And I guess generally the question is there anything glaringly obvious that we're missing that we really should mention that we've somehow neglected to, or that doesn't come out sufficiently strongly? So one of the discussions that we just had was that GMP was kind of saying that there isn't a sectional intervention, and that's partly because there's different sorts of interventions that are kind of spread throughout the paper. So there's kind of non-pharmaceutical kind of lockdowns and social distancing. There's vaccination, and then there's contact tracing, which are kind of split over different areas. And so
and there is a paper on interventions.
And there's a paper on interventions. So possibly, well, the discussion was, I think, that maybe in the introduction to the start of the paper, we just need to highlight that to make sure that people don't think it's missing. But,
yeah, signposting is always helpful.
Yeah. But if there are other things like that that kind of jump out to people, that'd be really helpful. Did you manage to get to much of this conference, Lorenzo?
No. When did you speak?
I was yesterday, and Jasmina had a session. But
no, I have. Yeah, I barely managed to kind of finish the slides just before talking, and then there are too many other deadlines. In particular, there's one about the Royal Statistical Society that has asked to kind of submit something on the reproduction number.
Okay.
Which is it's quite interesting that they seemed very confused. And you're like, well, if you're confused, then presumably everyone else is even.
Okay.
I understand it's a confusing thing, and just the fact that it appears in the media all the time just makes me very interested, but even more confused.
Yeah.
And so we need to submit something about that, and I just don't have the time or the energy to do anything anymore.
Yeah.
I think that regarding reproduction numbers, you should go also to that quote from the Confessions of St. Augustine, where he writes about time, where he says something like, everybody knows what time is until you try to think about what it is.
That's very true.
Yeah.
That's very true. But in some conversations that I had with them, they even seem confused between the basic reproduction number and the effective reproduction number. And I'm like, I really can't help you if we're at this level. So it really depends. Yeah, well, it really depends who you talk to, and Anyway, so this is completely.
So is that for a paper or a sort of public?
No, there's a meeting.
It's a meeting for the society. Yeah. It's just a small meeting with some people that have worked or thought about reproduction in the past or during this pandemic. But it also came after there were a couple of emails where they appeared quite confused and they just wanted to write some protests on Twitter or something about how it's currently done during this pandemic, and we pointed out that maybe we should have a scientific discussion about it instead.
Yeah. Okay.
Because ranty tweets are not going to help anybody.
Yeah.
So anyway, thank you very much for to everybody who is actually working so much on these papers. I haven't really managed to do much in the past couple of weeks.
Oh, also, actually, Lorenzo, I also meant to send you an email to apologize because I think I said we'd have a discussion about about chapter 8 or one of the sections. I can't even remember what we said we would do now, but I knew that I was supposed to do something and then contact you, and I haven't done either.
I did not remember.
Okay. I should have kept my mouth shut then.
Apologies accepted about something that I have no idea.
I don't know why. This feels like a kind of mutual confessions of overload due to this period. And there is a certain sense of overload. I noticed that I have, in theory, 1 or 2 conferences to listen to each day nowadays, because there are so many things happening, and it's more difficult to avoid them if you just see them on your screen. And then I should write many things, and there is a kind of overload coming on with this kind of virtual work that we are doing now in front of our screens. Maybe we should find some strategy to avoid it.
Yeah.
Well, it's the we have these two contrasting sayings in English. It says many hands make light work, but then the other one is too many cooks spoil the broth.
So the cooks
plainly contradict each other.
Yes,
so this is too many cooks spoil the broth, where you have too many people doing something, and so it's less effective.
Yeah, I heard the description. If a builder takes 1 hour to build a meter of wall, but 2 builders take 2 hours, because then you chat and then you have a coffee.
Yeah.
Talking about some particular number n of builders, they don't get anything done at all.
Exactly.
Talking about what you just said, all the conferences, did anybody look at the conference on herd immunity or the Stanford discussion on that, which was yesterday, I think, with... Okay, and then I perhaps have to look it back.
No, but then the question is anything new coming up in all these conferences? Because they are so close in time that I'm not sure that people have time to think new things between them. So maybe there's not very much new ideas coming up, although there's a lot of activity on presenting the old ones.
Does this sort of argument apply to papers as well?
Probably,
yes.
I mean, I don't really mean that we should go back to some idea that if you write 1 paper each year, that's good enough, because then you have really concentrated your thoughts. You could write 2 or 3 papers a year, maybe. But just now there's an enormous quantity of papers coming out all the time. And that was one of the arguments about Arnault and number of people in a society, how could R0 change with different size of the community? And that Estebeck had in his thesis, that at some point, even if there's a lot of people, you wouldn't have time to contact all of them for a sufficient time each. So R0 must flatten out at some point. And it's the same thing here with writing papers, I guess. But anyway, how should we progress with our paper now?
Well, so as I say, I think if I circulate a version later today, and then people, we can maybe just give people till next Friday to comment on it, and see where they think it's got to, and I maybe emphasize some things to look at, but I guess gaps are an obvious one.
How should we present our comments to be most productive?
To be honest, I'm happy if people just do their own version and just put comments on like a reviewer type of comment. So either commenting on the document or just in an email. I mean, I think whatever's most convenient for individuals, I think. Because I'm hoping it will be they won't be massively conflicting, but maybe that's too much to hope for. But I think I'm happy then to sort of take them and try and merge them and produce a new version, which hopefully we can then send to Hans for a sort of external look.
The main thing is that we kind of do external comments to the text, not internal ones. Then
yeah, I mean, I think if you spot some like obvious typos, I'm happy for you to correct them or point them out, or even just highlight them.
Okay.
Does that seem reasonable to everyone?
But you have time to kind of do the last things that you wanted to do. Look at.
Yeah, I've got time today. I don't have much time next week to work on it, but then if it's with you guys, then that.
So we wait for the next version, which also has a rewriting of 6.5 and 6.6 in it.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll be done. And then maybe we could have ours also in the submitted section.
Yeah, might be a little bit longer, but yeah, it'd be nice.
Yes.
Okay. We could probably leave it there unless people have got other things to.
No, I think that's good.
You have 10 minutes before your next meeting. No, or maybe even longer. Who knows?
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Glenn.
Okay.
Thanks, Glenn.
Yeah, thanks,
Okay.
everyone.
Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you. See you next week, same time.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So much, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.